Okay. So when you go to add new item, there are multiple things that you can add from this option here. But what we want is a class. Right? So what you can do is you can type here to filter out. You can just type class, and when you type class, you see that we remain with several options again. But what we want a class which is this one. So you select this class and then you give it a name. Don't remove the extension, it still has to be .cs. So you give this one a name. Let's say maybe the name of this class is demo. Okay. So after giving it a class, after giving it a name, like in this case, the class has been created. So this class, we decide what we want to be inside this class. In terms of the code, do we need any variables? Do we need any methods to be in there? Right. So in this case, let's suppose maybe which example should we use? Maybe let's use an example where we topic 6. Does it include arrays? Have you done arrays as yet? Let me just check. Just want to check which one is week 6. Okay. So this is we've done variables, flow control, functions. Okay, so that's OOP and classes. Okay, no problem. Right. So this is a class, and for a class, we have for inside the class we have what are known as we have the state for a class, and the state is represented by variables. They are basically variables that we have for the state. And then we have the behavior. So the behavior, these are basically methods. We use the word methods instead of functions in OOP, but it's still the same thing. So these are basically the things that we can have inside a class. Now you should remember that one of the properties of object-oriented programming is encapsulation. And when we talk of encapsulation, we are saying one, we have to make the fields. We have to make the fields or the state or the variables. We have to make them private unless we have inheritance involved. That's when if we want the variables to be inherited, then we don't have to make them private. But where we don't want them to be inherited, then we have to make them private. That's one, as far as encapsulation is concerned. The other thing is we write all code. All code is encapsulated inside a container called a class or an interface. So you don't write anything. You don't write anything inside a class outside of methods unless whatever you are writing is variable declaration. Okay. So I hope that's clear. All right. So in this case, let's create a variable. Let's suppose maybe for this class, we want to have the name. Maybe I should have called it person. Let me change this class to person. Let me rename it. So I'm going to right click and then I go to rename and right. Then I'm going to write person here and then I press enter. You are renaming a file. Would you like to perform a rename in this project? Yes. Want everything to be renamed. Right. So this class is now called person. Right. So for the attributes of a person, we have the name. So let me have string name. What else do we have? Maybe address. Right. By the way, as long as we are declaring variable of the same data type, we can declare them on the same line. We just split the variable names with commas. What other property do you want us to include for a person in addition to these ones? Maybe with a different data type, something that's not a string. Is there anything that you would want us to include? Can you guys still hear me? Hello. All right. So which data type could be most appropriate for age? Okay, so we can just say someone is 20 years, is 19 years, etc. All right, that's fine. So let's have int age. All right. Now, having done this, we can now have methods. While we are still here, can you talk about constructors? All right, let's just have methods. Let's have a, okay, I think, let me check what's happening here. I think could be, I'm not sure if it's a hand up or if it's some, all right, there's someone who wants to join. All right. Right. When you guys were going through the material, have you looked at constructors as yet, or you haven't? Okay. I'm asking because I wanted to make a decision. Should I talk about constructors now or maybe talk about them later? But anyway, let me just talk about them now. When we have variables that are declared inside a class outside of any methods, and those variables are not marked as constants or static, like the ones that I have here, these are called instance variables. So we call these ones instance variables. Right. I think if I were to ask you guys what is an object, can you give me a definition of an object? What is an object? We have classes, we have objects. So what is an object? You can just unmute yourself and talk for the sake of our time. What do you understand by object? Anyone? Okay, we are saying an instance of a class. So in this case, we have a class called person, and if we take you, that's that's Shongwe. Is that how you pronounce your name? All right. If we take you, you are a person. You are an instance of this class called person. So when you take you, we are taking you as an object. So for you, you are going to have your own name. You are going to have your own address. You are going to have your own age. If I take myself, I'm also an instance of a person. I'm going to have my own name, my own address, and my own age. So what it means is, for instance variables, each instance or each object will have its own values different from others for these variables that we have here. Okay. So that's why we are calling them instance variables. Now, instance variables, they are initialized using a constructor. So we basically use a constructor for two things. We use a constructor to initialize instance variables. We also use it to create objects. So a constructor is basic. It's a special method that is the same name as the class. So in this case, our class is called person. So the constructor will also be called person. Right? It's a method, just like you can see here. It does not have a return type, not even void. If you write void here, you are creating something else that's not a constructor. And as far as C# is concerned, it gives you an error. If it was Java, it was not going to give you an error, but it was going to take this as a different method, not as a construct. But you can still add an access modifier, like in this case, let's make this one public so that we'll be able to access it from other classes. So this is a constructor that I've created here. Now, I'm going to use this constructor to initialize these variables. Okay. So what we do is, if I'm going to use this constructor to initialize the variables, I'll create what's called a parameterized construct. It's basically a constructor with parameters. So this is a parameterized constructor that I'm creating here. Then I'm going to use the same names that I have here. You could use different names. What's only important is that the data types must be the same. But it's also advisable to use the same names so that you know which variable is associated with which one. So I'm going to write string name, string address, and then int age. Okay, like that. Now this name that I have here, it's a local variable. It's local to this method or to this construct. This address is also local to this constructor. This age is also local to this construct. But as you can see, this is name and this is name. So how do we differentiate between the name that I have here and the name that I have here? We use the keyword this. So the keyword this, it's associated with an object. So in this case, we are saying if I write this dot, well, it has given me a suggestion. If I write this dot name, what it means is when we create an object of this person, we are going to pass values, one representing the name, the other one representing the address, and the other one representing the age. So this name that will pass here is the one that I have here. And that's what's going to be stored as the name of that person. I don't know if this is making sense to you. If is it? Are there any issues there? I've completed the construct. So basically, this constructor is initializing these instance variables. Are there any questions on that? Any questions? Okay, so that's all right. So I'm going to assume that that one is straightforward. Now this is a method, like I said. Let me create another method to display these details, and I'm going to make it public as well. A method that displays does not return any value, so the return type is going to be void. Right, something like this. Then to display these names, I'm going to use the console class. So I'll write console dot write line. Right. You can use write or write line. The difference between using write and write line is that if you use the write line, after displaying whatever I'm going to write inside here, the cursor goes to the next line. If you use the write, after displaying whatever you would have written inside here, the cursor does not go to the next line. It remains on the same line, which means if there is another message being displayed below this one, it's going to be displayed on the same line. So in this case, let me display name like this, right? And then we are going to take the name from the variable name. So this displays the name, and then we do the same to display the address, and then we'll write plus address, and then console age, and then plus age. All right. Now, what I've done here, it's one way of displaying the variable, I mean, the data contained in these variables. Alternatively, instead of writing this plus here, you could write this. And when you write it that way, then here you are not going to put a plus, you are going to put a comma. So, have you ever seen something like this before? This one. Have you? Or you haven't?
Yes, yes.
You have.
I think so.
All right. Okay. So when you are using this approach to display, you it's like indexing. You start from 0 and then you go to 1, you go to 3. So the maximum number that you can have inside these curly braces should be one less than the number of variables that you have outside of the brackets. So what I mean by that is these statements that I have written here. Suppose we wanted to display all of these on one line. We could write something like name, then like this, and then I put a 0 here. So this is a placeholder for some value that we are going to get from a certain variable that I'll specify later. Then maybe I could write address, and then this time I'm going to write 1. It's not 0 because we're going to get the address from a different variable. And then here I could write age, and then, all right, write age. And then here we are going to get age from the third variable, which is second if we start from 0. Then after this, we are now supposed to specify the variables in that same order. The first variable that we are going to specify should be the one from which the name is going to be read. The second one is the one from which address is going to be read. And the third one is the one from which age is going to be read. So we're going to write them in that order. So write name, comma, address, comma, age, like that. So this is how you do it if you want to display multiple values without writing it this way. So this is another way. This is another way. If you wanted to do it this way, are we still together on this? All right. So, okay, that's great. So what I was saying is, alternatively, you could do it this way: name, then you close the double quote, then you write your plus, and then you write the variable name, and then you then concatenate a plus. As far as if you are dealing with strings, a plus is a concatenator. It joins two strings. So you could come here and write plus, and then we write address. Let me put some space here so that there will be space when this after the name is being displayed. And then when you come here, we'll then write plus address, and then we come here and write age, and then we come here and write plus age. So if we do it this way again, it's going to display the name, address, and age, all of them using just this one line. So you could do it like this, or you could do it like this, or you could do it the way I did it earlier on, where you display one attribute on its own line. So this basically does the same thing. This. I'm going to leave them as they are so that you see how the output will be like when you finally do the display. Okay. So this is basically how we create classes with instance variables. This is a constructor, and this is a method. You can have as many methods as you want with any return types. In this case, this is not returning anything, so the return type is void. This is a constructor. A constructor does not have a return type. It must have the same name as the name of the class. If you don't create a constructor of your own, like if I were to remove this one, if we don't create a constructor of your own, the compiler will insert a constructor for you. And that constructor is called a default, no argument. Default no argument constructor. That's the one we call when we write new person. When we write new person like this, we are calling a constructor for this class person, and that constructor has no arguments or no parameters. When we talk of arguments and parameters, these are terms that are often interchangeably used, but they mean different things. What I've written here, these ones are parameters. The ones that you write when you create a method are parameters. The actual values that you pass to a method when you are invoking it are arguments. But even if you just call them parameters and arguments interchangeably, I'll understand you guys. I've heard so many people doing that, but there is a difference. Okay. So having done this now, I'm going to create another class. Like I said, I'm going to have just one class with the main method for my project. So this class does not have a main method. If I try to execute it, it won't execute because the compiler will not find the main method, which is the entry point. So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to create another class the same way I created this class called person. I normally call the class that is the main method, I normally call it the driver class. So let me do the same thing. I come to the project here, I right click, go to add, then go to new item, and then select class. So I'm going to call this class, I'm going to call this class driver. Right, and then here is my driver class. So what I'm now going to do here, I'm going to create a main method. So the signature of the main method is written as public static void main, like this. That's the signature of the main method. Now what I want to do here is I want to create an object of this class person, and then invoke the method display. Now, this class does not have a no argument constructor, because what happens is the moment you create your own constructor with parameters, that default no argument constructor will cease to exist. It won't be inserted for you by default. So when I come here, I cannot write something like, right, let me write person p. Right, writing person p like this is not an object. I want you to understand that one. P is not an object. P is called a reference variable. We create an object by invoking the construct. So we create an object by writing new person like this. This is how this is what creates an object. And we are now going to use this variable to refer to that object. Now here I have an error because when I write new person, I'm trying to invoke a constructor that doesn't exist. I don't have a constructor without parameters in the class person. So that's why we are getting an error here. So let me write Shongwe as the first name, as the name, and then let me write. Are you not in Botswana? All right, maybe let me write Botswana. Let's say Shongwe is 10 years old, right? Something like this. That error disappears. So what I've done here is I've created an instance of the class person, and that instance of the class person has the name Shongwe, the address is Botswana, and the age is 10. Okay. Now, if I want to display these details now, I'm going to write p dot, and then I invoke the method display like this. Let me run this one and let's see what we'll get as the output. Okay, so in this case, it is displayed the output, but the screen just disappeared immediately. So what we want to do is let's make it wait for some input. So to wait for some input, we want it to wait until a user clicks some key. So let's have console dot read key. So, right. So after displaying, it's going to remain display. The content is, I mean, the output is going to continue being displayed until I press any key. So let me run it again this time around. Let's see what the output is going to be. Okay. So this is what's being displayed. Remember the first line that we have, if we have to go back to this one, to our display method. We display these ones side by side. Right. The first line is this one, name, then name. As you can see, name, then name, address, followed by address, 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 age, age. And then this line is the one that is displaying the address. And then we have this line that's displaying the age, which is this one. And then we have this line that I say does the same thing as this one. So it's displaying name, as you can see, address, and then the age. Any questions on what I've done here? Is it clear? Can I add more content to this, or you have questions? All right, that's fine then. So I'm not going. So I think let me just remove some of these things, and remain with one that is displaying. Now, in this case now, when we come here, you see that I'm creating a person with hard-coded values, hard-coded name, a hard-coded address, as well as a hard-coded age. We don't want to do this because we should be able to create an object of any person. So we want to get the name from a user, the address from a user, as well as the age from a user. So to do that inside this one, I'm going to declare variables to store the name, the address, and the age. So the name and address, they are strings, right? For me to avoid confusion, instead of using different variable names here, I'm just going to use the same variable names that I have in that class. So I have string name, address, and then we have int age, like that. Then we are going to ask a user to enter name, and we store the name in the variable name. So name, okay. The first thing is to prompt for user input. So we have to prompt for user input, and then we'll display a message console dot write line, and then we say enter a name or enter your name. Right. Then this is what's going to be displayed, and then we want to read that name and store it in the variable name. So we are going to have name, and then we have console dot read line, like that. So console dot read line, it reads everything that the user would have entered until they press the enter key on the keyboard. Then we do the same thing. We are going to tell the user to enter their address. So we have console dot write line, enter address. Then we store the address in the variable address using the same console dot read line. Oh, I don't want to trim it, just want to do it that way. Now for now we are going to accept the age from a person. But after that, we don't want to accept the age. We want to accept something, maybe say year of birth, or maybe date of birth, and then we calculate the age instead of getting the age from a user. But let's get the age. Let's say console dot write line, and then we ask a user to enter age, and then we store age. Right. We are going to have an error here if I write console dot read line. We are going to have an error here. The error that we are having is that this method readline returns a string. Whether a user would have entered a number, like say maybe 10, 15, 25, whatever the number, when you use the readline, it gets returned as a string. And the variable age is of type int, it's not a string. So what we need to do here is to cast from a string to an int, and we can do that by writing int dot parse. We have more than one way of doing this. We can write int dot parse like this. Right. That's one way of doing it. We are converting in a string to an int. Alternatively, you could write it like this. You could write convert dot, right, to int 32, because we want to convert that one to that convert dot to int 32, and then you write the statement for accepting input console dot read line, like this. So what I've done here and what I've done here, they are the same. We are basically converting a string to an int. Any questions? So I need to do this so that I store it in that variable. But we are not going to repeat it because it's the same thing. So let me just remain with one. You choose whichever you want to use between these ones. Okay. So having done that, now we have accepted the name, the person's name, the person's address, and age. So we are now going to replace this one with the variable name, and then we replace this one with the variable address, and we replace this one with the variable age. So if I run this one this time around, It asks enter name. Let me write test name. Then it asks enter address. Let me write test address. And then enter age. Right, right, 98. And then it displays name, test address, age 98. So if I enter for a different user again, if I enter for a different user, right, you guys, can you allow me to make one more modification? I don't want to be closing the application, go back, run it again so that I can enter another record. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to use a statement called go to. There's a statement called go to, and this statement, it works with a labeled statement. So go to, it basically means from here, go to that statement. All right. I hope I'm not telling you too much, a lot of things in a short space of time. But you guys, I know you manage, you understand this. Okay, so a labeled statement. In this case, let me have a labeled statement called input. So this is what we call a labeled statement. You write a label and then then you put a colon after that. So this is a labeled statement. Okay. So what I'll do here is, after displaying, I'm going to ask a user if they want to continue entering another record or not. So I'll come here, console.writeLine. Do you want to enter another record? Right. Then we tell them type yes or no. Now, because we are asking a user to enter input here, it means that we should store what the user would have entered. So let me declare a variable. Ideally, we should declare variables at the beginning, like we should declare all variables that we want at the beginning. So let me just declare another variable here. Since a user is going to type yes or no, I'm going to declare it as a string. So let me create a variable called choice. And then when I come here, we store the user input in that variable choice. So we have dot red line like this. Okay. Now, because the user has entered, we want to check if the user entered yes or no. So I'm going to write an if statement. So write if choice dot, because we are comparing strings, it's not advisable to compare strings using an equal sign like this. This should be reserved for numbers. When we are comparing strings, we should use the method equals like this one. So we want to check whether the user has entered yes, and if the user has entered yes, then we write go to that labeled statement, which is this one. If the user enters yes, we want to come back here and then we ask them to enter a name again. Else, which means if the user has entered something else, we can just display a goodbye message. We can just say, thank you for using my system. But be mindful when you are displaying messages to users. Be as polite as possible. You don't know who's going to use your system. So you can't be writing rude messages. Suppose you write rude messages and the system is going to be used by your father or someone you respect, and then those rude messages are going to be displayed to him. So try to be as polite as you can. All right. Are we guys still together? All right. Now there's something that I want us to add on this line where we are checking if the choice is if the user has entered yes. You know, when you're dealing with users, you don't know what they're going to do. You tell a user to type yes, and then they might type yes in lowercase, or maybe they might type yes in uppercase, or maybe they might use mixed case to type this yes. Now this one, it's case sensitive. It compares it in that same case. If someone types yes in uppercase, it's going to return false. It's going to be considered as different from this. So what we want to do to cater for that, Let's convert what the user would have entered, whatever is in choice. Let's convert it to lowercase. So we type to lower like that. To lower is a method. So what this does is it converts what we have here to lowercase, and then we then compare it to yes, that's also in lowercase. So once we do this, we are no longer worried about what case did the user use, whether they used uppercase or lowercase or mixed case. It's going to be converted to lowercase, and then we compare it to this string that's also in lowercase. Right. Let me go ahead and do this one. Let me execute it again. So we ask a user, enter a name. Let's say this user is called Goto. Enter address, say BW, enter age, which is celebrating 25 years. Then it displays this one, the name, the address, and then it asks, do you want to enter another record? Let me type yes in uppercase. And then you see it goes back to say enter a name. So I enter another name, enter address, I enter another address, enter age, I enter another age, and then it asks, do I want that time I typed yes in uppercase. This time I'm going to type yes like this. And then still it picks that that one is a yes. And then it asks enter name, enter address, and then we enter the age, still like that. And then if I want, I type no, and then it says thank you for using my system, goodbye. I press any key, then it exits. All right. Any questions? No questions. Yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Maybe I went outside a bit. Can you please explain the function, the input,
This one.
the input? What does it do?
Okay. I said it's called a labeled statement. That I explained when I said it's called a labeled statement. We can use it
You
with
can use any name.
it has to be you can use anything that you want as long as it's a legal identifier in C sharp. You remember the rules that we follow when we are writing variable names. It's still the same thing with this one. It must not start with a digit. It must not be a reserved word. It must not contain space. All those other. It must not have a special character. So you can change this one. Like in this case, let me write Shongwe here. Right. Let me write Shongwe. And when I write Shongwe here, I'll come here and change this one to Shongwe as well. So it can be anything, anything really, as long as it's a legal identifier. If I run it, it still works the same thing. As you can see, there are no errors here. It even says no issues found. So it can be anything. It does not necessarily have to be input. We write anything, yes. So was that the only question? So what it does is when you get here, when we check if choice is equal to yes, then this statement go to it takes us from here to this labeled statement. So we got there. We don't continue with executing the lines that are coming after this one. We go to that labeled statement. All right. Are there any? Yes, go ahead.
Okay, I was looking at that statement where you're trying to convert the string,
To an int.
the age to
Yes.
that integer. Yeah.
Yes.
It's up to you which one you use. Because I was used to okay, I use the base.
You have been using this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, you can use this one or you can use this one. You choose which one you want. That's why I commented out this one because they are doing the same thing. Yes.
Are there any repercussions of using either of it?
No,
You can use any.
not really. You can use any. You can use any. The only other thing that you need to know here is when you try to convert, it might the conversion might fail because it will only succeed if a user has actually entered a number. But a user might enter something that's not a number. That's when you need to bring in the concept of exception handling, which I understand you guys have done as well based on our milestone. So maybe can I introduce it here if that's okay with everyone. Okay, let me show you. Let me show you what will happen. We want to ask a user to enter age, and then we are going to enter something that cannot be converted to a number. That's the name, that's the address, and then we are asking the user to enter age, and then they enter this. Right? You see what's happening here? There is an exception. It's an unhandled exception, and then it comes here. It goes to the source code, and then it shows system.format exception. Input string was not in a correct format. This you don't want this to happen. You don't want when users are using your system, if there is an exception, then it stops running and it goes to the source code. You don't want this because users won't even understand what's happening, and someone will even try tamper with this, try to just whatever key they are going to press, and then it's going to affect your code. And again, it stops executing the code the moment it encounters this exception. It stops executing the code. So what we want is to handle this exception. And when we handle the exception, that means we are going to display a customized message that tells the user what went wrong. And then again, it continues executing whatever other code that we had. So, right, maybe to make it simple, I can put all this code inside a try block. But what we are mainly interested in putting inside a try block is this one. So maybe let me just put this one only. So we handle exceptions using the try catch block. When you write try, it should be followed by catch. You see, you see the error message that was showing when we went back to when that error was shown. There's an error message that was shown: number format exception, etc. Input string was in a wrong format. So that one is called an exception object, and we want to handle it. We want to store it in some variable. So what I've done here is I've declared a variable that can store an exception. This is an exception class, and this is the variable name. So I'm going to take this line for converting to an int. I'll put it inside try. We're going to try it to see if it's going to succeed. Now, if this succeeds, then we are now having an error here because we are now having an error here because of we are using an unassigned local variable age. Why is the compiler saying that? It's because we are doing the assignment inside the try and it might fail. Yet when we come here, we are using this variable. So to avoid this, let me take these two statements and put them inside try again. Okay. So here we are going to try do the conversion. If it succeeds, we go ahead, create an object of person, then invoke the method display. If it fails, we want to display a message to the user, a message that we want. So we are not going to do it that. We are going to say maybe sorry, your age must be a number, like that. But you can go ahead instead of just displaying this. I'll come back to that in a moment. Let me run this one. Try to enter the same input that I entered. Okay. Before I do that, all right, that's fine. Let me just run it. Right. Here I enter name, I enter age, then I enter this one. So it says, sorry, age must be a number. And then it goes to ask, do you want to enter another record? You see, this one, it has not terminated to go to the source code because we have handled the exception. it displays a message and tells the user that age must be a number. So the user can go back and check and say what is it that they entered for age, and then they'll see that okay, so I must enter another. So it asks, do you want to continue? And then we ask yes, and then we can enter the name, we can enter the age, I mean the address, and then maybe let's enter the age. So you see everything now goes on without the code being prematurely terminated and going back to the source code to show where the error is. So it's not always the case that this conversion will succeed. It might fail depending on the user input. All right. Now I wanted to say something here. Here I've displayed the message, sorry, your age must be a number. Now I can take this object that would have been thrown in and stored in this variable. I can display just the message from that one, just the error message. So I can write exe dot message. Message, it's a property that's defined in the exception class. So it just displays the error message. So let me run it again. This time I want you to notice how the error message will appear, having added that statement. So let me do this. Right. So remember, I only wrote sorry, age must be a number, and then put a colon, and then wrote exe dot message. So the message property is the one that's returning this one. Input string was not in a correct format. Any questions? Is everything okay? Okay. All right. That's fine. One last thing, I think just one thing, and then I go because I have another meeting. So instead of entering the age, let's suppose maybe we want to we want someone to enter their year of birth. But I think I can give you guys that one as your homework. We can work with the date. You can ask a user to enter the date, and then from the date you can calculate someone's age. I think that would be too much for one day. But you can work with the date. And if you are going to work with the date, let's say here you could write date, right? Date time, that's the data type. And then maybe let me write DOB, and then I'll write new date time. So this creates a variable of type date time, and to accept the date of birth from a user. Let me create another variable date time, and let me say this one is today, and then I'll write system dot date time dot today, like that. So this retrieves today's date from the system based on the date that's being displayed on this compute. It's going to retrieve today's date and stores today's date in this variable today. From this variable today, we can write today dot days. I mean today dot day. If you write today dot day, it retrieves the day from that date. If you write today dot year, it retrieves the year, which in this case will be 2022. If you write today dot month, it retrieves the month. So what you can do is you could say maybe when you have for your variable age, you could calculate the age by writing something like age is equal to, and then we have DOB, which is the date of birth, dot year, then minus today dot year. That's if you are just going to calculate the age based on the years. I'm sorry, there's a bit of some noise where I am, but this is how you are subtracting the date of birth. It shouldn't be this like this. No, it should not be like this. It should be the other way. It's today minus DOB dot year. So this is how you calculate the age. But you should first of all get the age from a user and store it in this variable DOB. So I'm not going to complete this one for you guys because I want you to do some work. Let me do this. Maybe I will allow you to accept the input from a user. But for now, let me write. Let's suppose this person was born in February the 1st, maybe 1965. Is this the correct format? It's not. Okay. Cannot be converted. Cannot convert from string to long. From string to long. What's that? Okay. All right. So let me put it this way. So this is the date of birth. So let's suppose this person was born in 1965. And like I said, you guys, you are going to accept the age from a user, not to do it this way. So when you get here and then you say the age, that's today dot year minus dob dot year. I'm not sure what's the difference between 2022 and 1965. And then when we get here, right, when we get here, we are not going to calculate anything. Yes, we are not going to calculate anything because we already have the age here being calculated here. Let me just move this statement and put it here so that you guys you see how we replaced it. Let me run this one and let's see what we'll get. Remember, we are using a hard-coded date, which is 1965. What's happening now here? System dot out of range ticks must be between date timing and okay. Let me do this. Let me do this. I hope this is not going to confuse you, but let me do this. And then I'm going to put this one inside try. Let's see what we get there. An exception unhandled. Which one now? I handled the exception. Okay. System dot date time dot try now. See if it will still give us any issues. Again, which one? Date time ticks must be. And okay, let me. Sorry. Right, go to that. Go to is now within try. Okay, let me put everything. Let me put everything inside this. Right. I hope this is not confusing you, but let me try it and see.
What do you
All right, it's fine. I don't know why it's saying unhandled exception when it's inside try break when this exception type is thrown except. All right, that's fine. Um, this is something, whether it's because of the value that I put here, or maybe it's just want to check something and see whether it's because of the value that I initialized to. Okay, so is not the problem is not on this. The problem is on this statement, the date that I wrote here, the date that I initialized to this one. That's where the problem is. That's the one that's throwing the exception there. So you guys, your assignment, of course, not graded. I will not even ask you if you've done it because I know you are adults. Your assignment would be to do something like what I've done here. But what we want to do is we want to get the date from a user. Like you ask a user to enter their date of birth, a complete date of birth, but you have to specify the format, whether you want date, year, month, you specify the format, and then you use the approach similar to what I've been doing, where we retrieve the current date. You can retrieve the current date by writing where is that statement? This one, or even using today, it retrieves the current date, and then you go ahead and calculate the year. In this case, the age. In this case, I've just used the year, but you can also consider the month to check whether the month, that person's month of birth, is it a month that's earlier than the current month, or is it a month that's later than the current month? If it's earlier than the current month, then that means you can just subtract current year minus year of birth. If the month is later than the current month, then it means we have to subtract a one. After doing this, we have to subtract a one. What I mean is, suppose someone was born in November, we cannot just say 2022 minus the year they were born, because they have not turned a year older this year. So we have to subtract a one. I hope I hope you understand what I mean by that. All right, so I think because of our time, we have to end here. I have another meeting. Are there any are there any questions? I'll share this one with you. I'll upload this one on Blackboard. Now, after I upload it, what you have to do is when you extract it, for you to run it, after extracting it, this is what you do. You This is what you do. When you open this folder, you just double click this file, the .sln file. That's the solution file. If you double click this file, it should open Visual Studio and open this same view that we are seeing here. So you'll be able to choose which class you want to open, which class file you want to open, and from these ones. Just click the one that you want, and then the source code will show right here. Okay, so that's that for now.
Are you sharing it now?
Yes, I'll upload it just now on Blackboard.
Okay.
Yes. Are there any issues before we call it a day? All right, that's fine. If you have any issues, you just post the questions on Blackboard on the discussion forum, and I think maybe what we'll do is we'll have another session, but for that session, I would want you guys to point out the issues that you want addressed. But let's see. I think we have another session. It can't be. Maybe no. It can't be next. It can't be next Thursday. All right. We have another session. We'll discuss when. So So if there are no questions, enjoy the rest of your day.
Okay, thank you.
You are welcome. You are welcome.